last week we talked about who are you. So don't think that, like, when we go over tonight, the question is, what do I need? Okay, and we're not switching to something totally different. Like, okay, last week we talked about identity. Tonight we're going to talk about needs, because they go hand in hand. Okay, it's the flip side of the coin. If you look, I don't really know who said this, but I don't want you to think I said it. So we worship and identify with that which we think will meet our needs. Somebody really smart said that. Meaning, whatever we think we meet our needs will identify us. And that's why in cultures in the past, they would worship the sun god, because the sun god was going to, and the rain god, you needed both. We're going to make sure the crops grew. And we're going to meet their physical needs. So what we're going to look at tonight, when we look at that on the surface, what do I need? A lot of trouble comes with people when they have their needs and their wants mixed up, right? When they have those two things mixed up. So I'm going to give you the finality of it all right up front. What you really need is Jesus, the bread of life. That's the bottom line, so we'll do that first, right? We'll go over that first. And but Abraham Maslow, he was a behaviorist, and he was another guy that studied why people act weird. He said that we are driven by needs, and that's why we behave. We behave basically to get our needs met in some way or another. Now, we're going to break it up into the body, soul, and spirit, each component of man. Remember last week we looked at we have a physical body, we have a relating soul, a relating spirit. Okay? The body, the soul is your mind, emotions, and your will, and your spirit is something that's created by God to relate to Him and to relate to others. So with each component of man comes a set of needs. And this is a hierarchy. Maslow called this a hierarchy, which is a fancy word for a stepladder, meaning that the bottom rung needs have to be met first before we address the needs on the top. So if our physical needs are not met, we're going to be preoccupied with getting those physical needs met. Once our physical needs are met, then consciously and subconsciously we're driven by looking to get our soul needs met, our personal needs of the soul met. And then once those needs are met, only then can we exercise the spiritual need to love other people. So we all know physical needs are pretty obvious: air, food, and water, right? Without air, we'll die in a matter of minutes. Without water, we'll die in a matter of, days. And without food, we'll die in a matter of weeks. So those are our basic physical needs that we need to live. Now, this is one reason I don't buy into evolution, because if we were just physical creatures with physical needs, we'd be pretty damn happy in this country, right? I mean, think about it. Our physical needs have been met in a way that's never been met before since the beginning of time till now. I mean, think about just the advances we've made in the last couple hundred years. So if you think about it, for thousands of years, the physical creature comforts that people didn't have, that we have. So our physical needs are met like they've never been met. Never, ever. Which proves to me that we're not just physical creatures with physical needs, right? We have all the air. We have air conditioning in our cars, air conditioning in our buildings, air filters, air purifiers. I mean, we have good air. We have the best food. We can go within a mile of right here where we sit and find all sorts of food. We have food at our disposal like it's never been at our mankind's disposal before in our culture. We have water, purified water, bottled water, distilled water, sparkling water, vitamin fortified water. I mean, we have it all, right? So why aren't we delirious happy all the time, jumping up and down? We should never complain. We should never whine, because our physical needs have been met in a way that's never been met before. But what Maslow observed is that when your physical needs are met, we also, the less obvious is shelter and clothing. We can get around probably in this part of the country, running around naked and living outside, but you couldn't do that in other countries. In other parts of the country, you would die. But our physical needs are met. So once our physical needs are met, we begin to be driven by our personal needs. Okay? And our personal needs, okay, are much different. And a lot of times when I talk to people either in counseling or talk to parents in parenting classes, I'll ask them, what are your personal needs, or what are the personal needs of your children? And they really don't know. Well, they'll say, well, love, or, to give to your community. It's vague and undefined, and I'm surprised at how ignorant we could be that we do have these set of personal needs that God created. God created us with these personal needs. Okay, now our personal needs are made up of a need for love, acceptance, and forgiveness, being the first three. Okay, we all have a need to be loved unconditionally. We need a need to be accepted just the way we are. We have a great need to be forgiven. In fact, God's first move towards mankind was forgiveness. Right away in the garden, He forgave, but from the cross, Jesus Christ declared forgiveness for the entire human race to bring us back into relationship with Him. So forgiveness is always God's first move. So we have love, acceptance, and forgiveness. And these needs, when they're met, we feel secure. They give us a sense of security. Okay? And it doesn't matter how tough we think we are, or how brave or whatever. These are needs that are universal. Everybody has them. Tough guys, divas, we all have these needs to be loved, accepted, forgiveness, to have meaning and purpose in life. I remember I was reading an article by Leonardo DiCaprio in Parade magazine, and he said, listen, he says, there's only one reason we act, and that's so people will love us. He goes, anything else anybody tells you is nonsense. He goes, that's the only reason we do it, because we want to be loved. We have a need to be loved. I remember reading about Michael Jackson, and he said that he thought if he would just make the right song, the right video, and do it just right, that people would really love him. And then he had this insatiable need to be loved. We all have it. We have a need to be loved, to be accepted, to be forgiven. When we don't have these needs met, we're insecure. Okay? The other set of needs that we have as individuals is for meaning and purpose and adequacy. Okay, meaning and purpose in life, the feeling that we're important, the feeling that our life has value and that our life means something. And adequacy. Adequacy means empowerment. That we feel like I can do it. I can do this job. Or I can love other people, or whatever it is. We need to feel empowered to do whatever our meaning and purpose is. Those things all go together. If we have meaning and purpose in life, okay, we want to know that we can carry out that meaning and purpose, that we're adequate, that we're good enough to do it, that we're not helpless. So those set of needs make us feel significant. Now, if you look at the two sets, okay, security and significance, traditionally men have gotten their need for significance met through their jobs, all right, or their athletic performance. That's where the song by Springsteen, Glory Days, comes in. The guys sitting around in the bars talking about what used to happen. The time you caught that catch, or the time. I get together with some of my buddies from New Jersey, and we played in the state championship. And a lot of times they talk about that game and what happened and what went on. Okay, so men traditionally get that need for significance met through work, and they tend to move towards that need more, right? Meaning significance is more important to them than love and acceptance and forgiveness. But although it's important, but they tend to, maybe through being significant, they can get love, acceptance, and forgiveness. Now, women, on the other hand, they tend to lean towards those needs to be secure, to be loved and accepted and forgiven. Okay, so we look to different things to get those needs met. And the most obvious place, once we hit adolescence, right, once we get into adolescence, is to look to the member of the opposite sex for that love and acceptance. Romance is going to do it. But whether it's romance or your work or your athletic performance or your performance in any area, the arts, school, learning, whatever it is, okay, we look to get these needs met. Okay, these are not up for grabs. These aren't wants. These aren't things that we can live without. Okay, these are needs that have to be met. Now, I always say that if God created us with these needs, if He created us with these needs and didn't meet those needs, it would be cruel. He'd be a prankster, a cruel jokester in the sky that created us with these needs and left us to run on our own to scramble around to get those needs met. But what we're going to learn tonight is He's done something very beautiful. And He's met those ways, He has met these needs in a dynamic way, in an abundant way. So we have the need to feel secure, and we have the need to feel significant. Now, just as the body hungers and thirsts for food and water, the soul hungers and thirsts for love and acceptance. Just as if I was to cut off my air supply, my body would turn blue and everything would shut down and I would die, just as if I stopped drinking water, my internal organs would begin to be very dysfunctional and they would break down and I would die. If our personal needs aren't met, on the emotional and mental health level and spiritual level, we die. Okay, people get dysfunctional. They act crazy. That's why you have people that stalk somebody. Okay, a boyfriend that stalks the girlfriend after the breakup, or vice versa, is because that was their lifeline. That person met their needs, and they feel like they can't live without that person, that they're going to die without them. Okay? This is where all human dysfunction, I think, comes back to looking to get those needs met outside of Christ and the gospel. So just as our body would break down and become dysfunctional without food, air, and water, our soul becomes dysfunctional without having these needs met. Now, here's the catch-22. Notice that Maslow said that when your physical needs are met, okay, you begin subconsciously and consciously to be driven by those personal needs. When our physical needs are not met, if our body's falling apart, if there's something really wrong with us, we become preoccupied with that. However, it is tied in. A lot of people, when they're physically sick or ill, they begin to question their worth before God, and it's tied into the personal needs, but you're preoccupied with that. But when your physical needs are met and everything's honky-dory, you are driven to get those personal needs met, and that's really where our culture is. Our culture, where our physical needs are met, pretty much, and we're driven to get these personal needs met. They must be met. Here's the catch-22. If your personal needs are not met, then you cannot exercise your spiritual need, which we're not going to talk too much about tonight. But your spiritual need is simple. It's more of an active thing. You have a spiritual need to love and care about others. You have a spiritual need to love and give somebody else. But your spiritual need of loving others, you won't be able to do it unless you know that these needs are met. All you can do is pretty much fake it or attempt or try it. But in my relationship with my wife Carrie, I know that it would be very easy to look to her to meet these needs. She's beautiful, she's kind, she's loving, and I could really say, man, this woman could really meet my needs. But she can't, though. She can do everything right, and there's still going to be that emptiness inside of me, and it's going to come into play in our relationship. And it's going to come into play. It's going to cause rifts, it's going to cause dysfunction in our relationship if I'm looking for her to meet my